Today, we're talking about something super fun, romantic relationships, and how they always mirror our shadow back to us invariably. And for today's video, I'm super excited to be sharing some very quick, very enlightening shadow work techniques that you can do in just a matter of seconds or minutes to show you exactly what shadow aspects, what unconscious aspects of yourself, in other words, your partner is mirroring back to you for your own healing and integration. So first we have to talk about projection and what this is in relation to psychology and shadow work. So projection is the tendency of the human psyche to attribute an aspect of ourselves of which we are unconscious onto another person instead. And the reason for this, and this comes from Freudian psychology, it's an old concept, is that it's said that we can't simply become conscious like this of something that is unconscious. The psyche doesn't work that way. Something that is buried in our unconsciousness can't simply ascend to our consciousness directly. It goes about it by way of mirroring. So, and we learn about ourselves through mirroring ever since we come out of our mothers. We need that mirroring. We need our mother to be reflecting our emotions back to us to even know what emotions are in the first place. So it's a very integral part of the human psyche to learn about ourselves through mirroring of the other. And so when we get to be older, this happens through our romantic relationships most directly. This projection of what we have yet to integrate in ourselves onto the other, because it's so much easier and more natural to the human psyche to learn about ourselves in that mirroring capacity. And also, something about shadow is that shadow is responsible for all of our attractions and repulsions about people, things, circumstances, etc. So actually, the very thing that attracts us to someone is our own shadow as we are projecting it onto them subconsciously. And for example, since the universe, this comes from Jungian psychology, since the universe is aligned to help us integrate, is assisting us in becoming whole and individuated, so to speak, we are attracted, our very basic impulse is to go towards and learn more about our shadow, those aspects of us that we need to integrate that we have not yet. So that means that people, circumstances, events are going to be arising in our lives that help us see what we need to see in ourselves, help us see those shadow aspects and become aware of them and eventually integrate them into our own selves to become more whole. So with that background in mind, like what the universe is doing, it makes total sense why we would be attracted specifically to shadow aspects. And something that's really important that I think is not nearly discussed enough, especially with shadow, is that shadow is not just the so-called negative aspects of us that we have yet to integrate. It's also the positive qualities that we have yet to integrate, that we're not yet willing to claim as part of ourselves. So for example, something that really attracted me about my husband, Carlos, is that he's really loud, kind of like he's really happy and jovial and expressive is a better word for it. He's always expressing himself. And that is a positive shadow projection that I put onto him because that's in my shadow. In other words, as a child, I couldn't be self-expressive and be safe at the same time. So but I am self-expressive, as anyone who knows me can tell you, like, I'm really self-expressive, but I wasn't quite willing to identify with that characteristic in myself. But being with Carlos brings that out in me, right? Like, we are expressive together, and he inspires me to be more expressive, and that's to integrate that part of my shadow, that positive part of my shadow. And so this is a really beautiful way that shadow works in relationships, is that we project our positive shadow onto somebody, and then with time we learn to integrate that into ourselves simply by being inspired by them. And the more we allow ourselves to be inspired by them, to embody that shadow aspect, the more whole we become. It's just so beautiful. And so how shadow works in a so-called negative way with relationships is that parts of our wounding, parts of our childhood wounding that we have yet to acknowledge in ourselves are also invariably going to be mirrored in our relationships. So for example, if you're straight, usually it's the issues with the opposite sex parent who become mirrored in your relationship. And so, for example, before I met Carlos, I dated many, many men who were mirroring back negative shadow aspects of myself. So wounding that I needed to see and to integrate, to process more, specifically things like being emotionally unavailable, et cetera, et cetera. And so by being in relationship with them, I learned more through who I was with them, how I felt with them, and eventually moving along from them, I learned that I know that I need something else than that, which caused me to then be able to heal that wound, to recognize, okay, I deserve something more. Like I'm ready for emotional attunement with a partner and not detachment. And eventually, through a lot of shadow work in myself, I was able to get to a point in my own healing where I didn't need to attract partners like that anymore. The universe wasn't showing me people like that. Instead, I met my current husband, Carlos, who was totally different from that string of men, many of whom were very emotionally withdrawn, as just one example. So, and I often hear that from people who meet their future long-term life partner, is that that person seems very different, right, from that string of partners prior to them. And that's often because you get to a point in your own relationship with yourself, your own integration healing, where you no longer need to be attracting that family dynamic, that old dynamic of wounding, and you're ready to accept love in a more whole way and accept more of that positive shadow integration. Of course, it's never one or the other. It's always mixed. We always have positive shadow projections onto people as well as negative. So I want to give you some tools right now and they're super fun and easy to just see for yourself how in your relationship now, or maybe in your past relationships, if you're single now, how your shadow has been popping up. So the first tool number one, is super easy. You just, and of course this is by yourself, this isn't with your partner, you don't want to hurt them, is just judge your partner like crazy, completely uncensored. Just judge them. Like, I don't like, or they do this or this or this or this or this or this about them annoys me. And so, for example, if I were to say this about my husband, like one thing I would say would be like, it annoys me that he just does what he wants when he wants to do it. And so when you're done, and you can pause this video if you like, to just full on judge your partner, just get it out. What this does is it shows you when you, and I encourage you to write it down, when you have written down all these uncensored judgments of your partner, you'll begin to see and just get curious about, probably most of those things you're judging about them is annoying, irritating, you could not be when you were a child if you wanted your parents' approval. So, for example, like I could certainly never just do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. I was raised in a hypervigilant environment, you know, where I had to adapt to what other people wanted to do. So of course that's the thing that annoys me about him. But because I've recognized that, the light of awareness is shown on it, and I can begin to heal it. Like, oh, damn, that's true. That's not actually a bad thing about him. That's all about me. And so that gives me an arrow that points to what I can heal in myself. And the healing begins really as soon as we become aware of it. You don't need to do a huge process to heal it. Sometimes we do, but not usually. So, tool number two. Tool number two is to do a similar exercise, but now we're judging our partners using accusatory language of you. And this is something that you can either write down or just say in a very impassioned way. Like if I was to use that same example, I would say, you just do whatever you want to do when you want to do it, and you don't pay attention to me. And just you can go on for a lot of different accusations, and you can pause it again if you need to now. So this is really fascinating, and this technique is inspired by Byron Katie's The Work, an amazing technique. So if you have your list now, or you've yelled out your accusations, of course not directly to your partner, just by yourself, I want you now to replace the pronoun you with I, and then just see what happens. For example, I just do whatever I want to do when I want to do it, and I don't care what you're doing. I don't spend enough time with myself. If I had said, you don't spend enough time with me, I would say, I don't spend enough time with myself. And when you really let this sink in, once you flip the pronoun to I, you can see that we project onto the partner usually something that we need from ourselves. We expect them to give us something that we actually need from ourselves. So, for example, oh, I need to spend more time with myself. I need to take more quiet time with myself. I need to take more baths. I need to meditate more, or something like that. So that points the arrow back to something that I can do for myself, which I had just projected onto them before. So, tool number 3, and this is really fun, is now we're going to do the positive shadow reflection on our partner. So, I want you now to list all of the things that you really admire about your partner. So, for example, if I would say this about Carlos, I would say, you know, he's very self-expressive, he's brilliant, he's has high self-efficacy, which means he just has confidence he can do whatever he wants to do. He blah, 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 and just go on and on and on. And then look at your list and realize that every single thing you wrote down about them is actually a trait that you have in yourself. Because you wouldn't be able to see it and admire it in them if you didn't first possess it within yourself. And so the second tool, so tool number 4, but the second tool of the positive shadow is the same as before, except flipped to positive. So we're now going to praise our partners using the pronoun you. So for example, you're so brilliant. You have so much confidence. You're so self-expressive. And then, just like we did before, flip the pronoun to I. And I want you to really say this to yourself, about yourself. So I am so brilliant. I am so confident. I am so self-expressive. And just let it sink in. Just breathe and let it sink in. That it's actually about you. It can be about both of you, you and your partner. But your wholeness, your healing, depends on you recognizing this about yourself and allowing yourself to be elevated to the level that you elevate your partner with that positive shadow projection. And By the way, with positive shadow projection, it's not only with our partners, we also positively shadow project onto colleagues, onto famous people, onto our friends, etc. So with anyone who you're aware of that you're admiring, that you're a fangirl or boy of, just know that when you write down the list of what you admire about them, it's always going to be qualities that you have, but you're not quite ready to recognize them in yourself yet. So you're getting there. These tools will help you. So I wish you guys a wonderful week wherever you are, and wonderful month. And have a great time using these tools to better understand the shadow in your relationships and how to integrate using that beautiful mirror. Okay, bye.